So I'll call this meeting to order for the Business, Finance, and Justice Committee agenda, September the 21st, 2023 at 3 p.m. I'd like to ask Mr. Hicks, would say our invocation, please. Thank you. So we'll have our roll call. April Lindsay, our legislative clerk.
Patrick Freeman.
Here.
Sandra Golden.
Present.
Randall Hicks.
Present.
Thomasina Hola Osborne. Mark Randolph.
Present.
Madam Chair, you got 4 present and 1 absent.
So we have a quorum. Ms. Osborne is out because of her husband, so that's why she's not here. So we'll move on to the approval of minutes for August 17, August 29th, August 31st, 2023.
Madam Chair,
Yes, Representative Hicks.
I'll make a motion to approve the minutes for August 17th, 2023, August 29th, 2023, and August 31st, 23, with any changes as needed.
We have a motion made by Representative Hicks to approve the minutes, and we have a second by Representative Mark Randolph.
Randall Hicks.
Yes.
Mark Randolph.
Yes.
Patrick Freeman.
Yes.
Madam Chair, you got 3 in favor and 0 against.
So our minutes for August 17th, August 29th, 2023 are approved. We're down to the order of business, and because our chairperson is not available and we have a senior officer representative, my legislation comes up, so I'll relinquish the chair to
NCA 23-081, Law of the Muskogee Creek Nation, creating a new subsection 2-135 entitled Rules of Civil Procedure in MCNCA Title 27, Chapter 2. Sponsor is Miss Sandra Golden.
motion for a due pass.
We have a motion for a due pass by Mrs. Golden and a second by Representative Freeman. Discussion?
Before we go further, is there someone from the court that would like to address legislation? There has been a request for some changes for amendments, and with that, they needed more time. So I would like to make a motion to postpone this legislation indefinitely.
Motion on the floor to postpone NCA 23-081 indefinitely. Do we have a second?
Second.
Second by Representative Hicks. Roll call vote, please.
Sandra Golden.
Yes.
Randall Hicks.
Yes.
Patrick Freeman. Chairman, you have 3 in favor and 0 against.
3 in favor, 0 against. NCA 23-081 is postponed indefinitely. NCA 23-082. Substitute. A law of the Muskogee Creek Nation, creating a new subsection 2-136 entitled Adoption and Restatement of Torts, 2nd and 3rd in MCNCA Title 27, Chapter 2. Sponsor is Sandra Golden.
Motion to postpone indefinitely.
We have a motion to postpone indefinitely on the floor. Do we have a second?
Second.
Second by Representative Hicks. Discussion. Any discussion?
Yes, sir, thank you. This is being asked to be postponed indefinitely for the same reason that we mentioned before for 23081, because the court wants to look at it more specifically to make amendments and have more time to let attorneys know about it.
Thank you, Ms. Goda. Any more concerns, comments? Are they okay? All right, roll call vote, please.
Sandra Golden,
Yes,
Randall Hicks,
Yes.
Patrick Freeman. Chairman, you got 3 in favor and 0 against.
We have 3 in favor, 0 against. NCA 23-082 has been postponed indefinitely. I'll now relinquish the chair back to the chairman. Madam Chair.
thank you, Representative Randolph. Next order of business is NCA 23-108, a law of the Muskogee Creek Nation authorizing the expenditure of the 2023 In-Bridge Fueling Futures Grant for the benefit of the Muskogee Creek Nation Light Horse Police Department. Sponsor, Randall Hicks.
Madam Chair, motion do pass.
We have a motion for a due pass. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Mr. Representative Mark Randolph. Discussion?
Madam Chair, I believe we have Zachariah Harjo here that could probably elaborate on this, or we have Light Horse staff that's coming down as well, so.
Would you turn on the mic, please? Make sure the mic is on.
Yes, ma'am. Hi. I'm Angela Jones with the Light Horse Police Department. And this is permission to expend the funds for this grant. We received it. It's going to purchase 150 fire extinguishers that are needed for each of the patrol units for safety.
Questions? Hicks?
Not a question, just reiterate what she stated. I don't know if y'all heard her. Basically, it's a grant to purchase fire extinguishers for the vehicles or replace the
Yes, sir.
ones for the, I don't know if they heard you, so I just kind of reiterating what you stated, so.
Sorry. Thank
Thank you.
Or did you have anything you wanted to add?
No.
Questions? Comments?
Randall Hicks,
Yes.
Mark Randolph,
Yes.
Patrick Freeman.
Yes.
Madam Chair, you got 3 in favor and 0 against.
NCA 23-108 has a due pass. Would like to relinquish the chair again to Representative Mark Randolph.
Thank you. NCA 23-109, a law of the Muskogee Creek Nation authorizing the expenditure of American Rescue Plan Act, ARPA funds received from the United States government of the Treasury for the physical relief funding for Muskogee International LLC. Sponsor is Sandra Golden.
Motion for a due pass.
I have a motion for a due pass. We have a second.
Second.
Second by Representative Hicks. Discussion.
We have the CEO from Muskogee International, Mr. Matt.
Mr. McCutcheon, I'm sorry. Sorry, Madam Chair. Can you speak into the mic?
Oh, there we go. Okay, so this is a request for reimbursement using ARPA funds for employee health insurance premiums, vaccine incentives, and also we need to make our information technology a little bit more robust in order to meet some new guidelines coming out for DoD.
Thank you. Any questions, concerns? Go ahead, Mr. Harjo.
So we did have a few questions, and these are things that are bigger questions, not just for Muskogee International or MNB, but bigger questions about the expectation the nation has and should have of its subsidiaries. And again, going back to the nature of this request, it's a lot different than anything we've processed, and it's a request for reimbursement for funds that are eligible, but eligibility doesn't necessarily or doesn't necessitate an award. And I guess the things I would have council consider are the financial position of both companies, similar to the questions that were asked of Fountainhead. You know, the companies have historically struggled, and what, if anything, are we asking for in return in terms of an investment? Because this is an investment to both MI and MNB potentially, but it would open the door and the expectation for similar appropriations to be made for all of our subsidiaries. And there are a number of ways to consider it, but it just kind of goes down to the basic numbers. When we requested for confirmation of the expenditures as well as detailed expense reports and things like that, there were some overall questions. And I know both Matt and Vivian are more than happy to answer a lot of these questions, but these are things that council needs to be aware of and asking themselves. You know, some of the historical challenges that both MI and MNB have faced is a lack of investment, you know, upfront from the nation, but also they've struggled mightily, even with the constraints that they were placed in, but even with the great efforts that people such as Matt and Vivian have made. And this is a significant amount of money that, you know, me as the Secretary of the Nation and ultimately attempting to fiscally manage these funds, I get a lot of questions about, you know, we're making this appropriation. Could it go to 20 elder homes? And would that not be a better expense than, you know, a company that's historically struggled? But again, you know, I understand that there is a time and a need for investment. And I guess the other thing I would have council consider is, again, you know, what can we expect in return for this investment? I know both MI and MNB have asked for funding or assistance at least to procure a building or establish something new. You know, I think a reasonable expectation of council could be if making this investment puts them in a better position, then it should be feasible for them to create and establish, you know, new things, whether that's a building, whether that's new employees or new opportunities in terms of their federal contracting. I think those are all questions and things that need to be continually asked and reconsidered. But there are also other structures we might consider as well, because again, you know, MI and MNB to this point have demonstrated they are eligible for this, but it doesn't necessitate an award. And I think especially for our remaining ARPA dollars, it requires all of us to be as fiscally responsible as we can and how we create a ongoing pool of funds. And I think one of the interesting things that recently came into my mind is a lot of recipients of ARPA funding, if they're a large government and supporting subsidiary businesses, they created their own revolving fund. And with portions of those grants given to the businesses as being forgivable, but there is still an expectation to return the investment that the nation or that the recipient government had made to the subsidiary. And these are all things that we can talk about if council is more interested in them. It can still go on the September agenda if there's more interest in it. But there are other, I guess, ways we could make this appropriation, do so in good faith, make an investment, but do so with the full confidence that we're not only investing in MNB and MI, but we're investing in the nation's business endeavors, that this will ultimately lead towards success, that this will lead to enhanced distribution schedules, this will lead toward jobs here in Okmulgee, and not that they haven't done that, but there is so much more that I think we could realize as a tribal government operating entities that are in federal contracting. And whether that conversation is between all of us here with MNB and MI, I think it warrants further discussion, absolutely. And so again, the questions that I asked are more than fair, but there are things that I know that Matt and Vivian and their board can answer to. And really the decision lies back with council. So these are questions that, you know, any ARPA appropriation for our subsidiaries, they're all gonna be asked. I mean, they're all gonna be expected to produce and defend their financials and whether it's worth the nation making an additional investment. One of the things kind of overall that I've noticed is, and each company is different, but every single one of our subsidiaries to this point has struggled immensely that if they were forced to pay federal income taxes and weren't sheltered through the nation's immunity to income tax, whether personal or federal, these companies would have struggled mightier than they have now, or they may not be here. So we're dealing with very kind of delicate things, and it requires a lot of in-depth analysis over it. So with those statements and questions in place, I yield my time back. Maddow.
Thank you, Mr. Harjo.
Mr. Harjo,
Yes, ma'am. Go ahead.
I just wanted to clarify that, as Muskogee International, we have not historically struggled with zero appropriations from the nation. We've distributed 550,000 back to the nation. So yeah, here since COVID, we have taken a hit, but that's exactly what these funds are for. These is a recovery effort. It's intended for small businesses to help them get back up to speed. So I'm not sure about.
Thank you.
So when was this distribution, this 550,000?
So we did 100, I think it was 150, or maybe it was 100 in 2017. In 2019, we gave like another 150, and then there was 300.
So that historic, I think Mr. Harjo is pretty correct. I think that historically how long have you been how long have you been functioning as Muskogee International?
So we'll be in 10 years now.
Okay. So I'm going through your information here. So this is a reimbursement. Where does it usually come from? Where do you usually pay for all this? It's a reimbursement for incentives for vaccine and for, vaccine incentive, and then you have paid incentives here for these employees that you've contracted out.
I'm not sure I understand the
I'm
question.
just looking at your information here.
I'm sorry, what's the question?
So kind of explain your incentives, your vaccine incentive cost, and your, looks like just an employee incentive cost here. Like it's $12,000 to every employee you had. Is that right? Am I reading that right?
So the vaccine incentives were $500 for an employee that got a vaccine. The total amount for
Looking
that
at
was
this matrix here,
44,
this-
almost 45,000.
This MI executive order tracking matrix.
Apologies, I don't have that form with me, but I think that column, at least that Mr. Hicks pointed out to me, that's the date it was paid to
What?
the employee. The date the incentive was paid to the employee. So once they provided proof of vaccination, we paid them $500 as an incentive for getting the vaccination.
Oh, can't read it. I'm sorry, my apologies. I was sitting there looking, I said, that's a heck of an incentive.
Yeah, that would have been.
Any other
I
questions?
think I'll take another vaccine shot.
Ms. Golden, you have the floor.
yes, you've been working on this since October of last year, Mr. Harjo, and they've provided a number of different documents for you, and you prepared this, did you not? So you still have some questions that never got answered?
No, these questions are for council to consider. These are bigger questions that me as the organizer and the person that's seeking for eligibility isn't beyond me to consider.
So what I have a concern about is that, we're just now doing this, and other programs have been reimbursed for their vaccine incentives. But we keep holding these companies back because they haven't performed, somebody says.
The nature of this request is very different than anything we've passed before.
But they have employees that they did pay. So that's a vaccine incentive that everybody else got.
Yes, eligibility does not dictate whether they receive an award or not.
But everybody that asked received it.
To my knowledge, yes. I mean, there's
Okay.
other
Okay,
instrumentalities, there's other
so,
government offices that we haven't covered
So
yet.
the other part of this is that you were looking into this since October. Well, my concern is that this has been prolonged and prolonged and prolonged. And it is these are businesses that we have, our companies. And if there are companies and we're investing in them, when we don't put any monies for them to reimburse them, then we are holding them back. And so I guess I see it differently than you do. and I don't understand your questions about it.
Thank you.
Chairman.
Any other questions? Representative Hicks?
Thank you, sir. Just kind of curious as well. When did this first start, or who initially approved this? It was probably before your time, correct, Mr. Harjo? It was probably approved before your time, and then you're coming in afterward trying to clear up, is what I'm understanding.
Yes, the original request that was made was not approved by the former secretary. She had her own justifications, and it never made it to council. And again, I've been tasked with, to date, many appropriations. It is not feasible for me to single-handedly do this, which is one of the big reasons why, particularly for the subsidiaries, and providing the expertise that council needs to hear about, what business moves are best, that has lied outside of my office, and it wasn't until we have a functioning commerce division that has expertise that the tribe did not possess before that I felt comfortable moving forward with these decisions. And for that reason, Ms. Golden, if we got audited, and if there was anything that had slipped up in that time between me rushing through it last October and now, the nation would be the ones liable for it. And there were a
And they
few
had an
questions that
audit.
if I can finish, I would appreciate that. There were questions that have arisen between then and now that I would not have known to ask. And it would have likely resulted in an appropriation without all the things considered, and things that the nation or MNB or MI would have been required to pay back. So I apologize it's taking this long, but it has required every ounce of fiscal responsibility. And for it to take this long, I think it deserved it.
Did you review their audit for this year?
Sir. I still have the floor, Ms. Golden, I'm sorry.
Sorry.
So I don't see Chief on, so I guess, Mr. Williams, this question is going to come to you. This legislation came through Chief's office. So I guess my question is Chief, is he okay to pay this?
I apologize, Representative Hicks. I do not have the answer for that. A lot of the legislation goes through different secretaries' offices, and sometimes it gets to me. I haven't reviewed this document, so I can't say yes or no what Chief would say about that. So, apologize.
I'd like to ask a question. I'm trying to understand this myself. Can you answer, how did this start? Did someone come and, when you say reimbursement, what initially happened? How did this come about?
So originally how this started out was all we were looking for was just trying to get our vaccine incentive reimbursed. We talked to the current Secretary of State at the time. She was completely fine with it. She was completely fine with it, said there was no issues there. Never heard back anything. She acted like it was fine, it'll be taken care of. Never heard anything. We were never told that she had reasons for not approving it. I mean, that one was pretty simple. As we went along, we engaged Mr. Harjo here. We started learning more and more about the program. We understood that he told us we can get all of our health insurance premiums returned. We're like, okay, that's great. Still, the thing kind of got on the fence. We went in, started reviewing the legislation ourselves, figured out exactly, okay, what are the things that, we feel like would be justifiable that we can get that are easy. From a regulatory perspective, all of these things fit within that framework. There is no conversations about investment, return on investment. That has nothing to do with ARPA. This is simply Recovery Act trying to help out businesses, organizations that were impacted by COVID.
Thank you, sir. Is there anyone online from Chief's office that can speak to this legislation? Okay. Go ahead, Mr. Hicks.
Representative Freeman and I were just sitting here speaking. So it's COVID related.
Correct.
So the first batch of money that we received was from the CARES Act. So shouldn't this money be coming from the CARES instead of ARPA, or is that?
So the period of eligibility that they're applying for began with the eligibility period that ARPA started, April 2021. So everything that's covered here is from that time period till the end of the public health emergency, which is May 11th of this year. And so to give a little bit more detail to their request, it's so they've been incurring all these costs, covering them on their own through their own revenue and business activity. They're eligible for reimbursement, and what the former secretary, I think, had approved was simply their vaccination incentives. Now, under the final rule, there's other eligibility categories that they qualified for as well, which is what increased their from their initial request to now. And then, the reason why I bring the investment question back to council is it is a reimbursement, but this is still a distribution the nation is making, and it isn't an investment of some kind. And these businesses are created to return that investment back to the nation. And that's the whole reason I bring up the discussion, because it's asked of all the other subsidiaries. It needs to be asked of MNB and MI. And again, to my knowledge, they have answers for those questions, and it is up to council whether it's worth making this investment or not. I would say that in the years that I've been here and knowing the work that Matt and Vivian have put in, it is worth our investment. But there are bigger questions that I can't answer as a sector of the nation, but elected officials have to consider.
Thank you, Mr. Harjo. Representative Hicks, Chief's on the line now if you want to.
Yeah. Good afternoon, Chief.
Good afternoon. Sorry, I was in the investment committee, but go ahead. I missed majority of it.
Chief, we're discussing bill number NCA 23101, the reimbursement for
Yes.
Muskogee International.
Yes.
The question that I had asked, there's been some discussion going on. And so my question was, since this came from your office, you're authorizing the reimbursement to Muskogee International, correct?
Yes. When we first had this meeting, I've been on the council. I've seen what where MNB was at before and where it's at now, and I know it's for Plan they've done a lot, and you've seen growth, and as well as Representative Golden, she sits on that board. Just wanted to do what we could to help them out, because I think they're starting to return some of that money back that we haven't seen in a while. So that's, and during that meeting, I think you was there as well, that just felt like they, any way we could possible through the ARPA funding to assist them as well.
Thank you, Chief. I guess some of the statements or concerns is MNBE and MI are not, what's the word? Progressing, I guess, financially. And so the investment has came up into these two businesses and basically saying it might not be a good investment for this ARPA to reimburse them. So that's where the dilemma is now. I don't know if it's a dilemma, but discussion. That's where a lot of this discussion is coming up, because it came from your office for approval, and then now some discussion has been brought forward about it not being a good investment. So I don't know.
Has Vivian been given the opportunity to speak? Like I said, I haven't been in full discussion in the BF&J meeting, so I didn't know if Vivian had a chance to speak.
Not yet. We're on the Muskogee International. Just Matt has spoken.
Okay. It's all I can do is present this, and it's totally up to the council if they feel that we want to do this and to assist them in their business. Like I said, it's may take a while for them to turn it around, but I've seen a lot of the MNBE especially have turned the business around. So
Chief, I'm sorry.
Go ahead.
Chief, do you remember who initiated this or gave them authorization?
This had started last year, I think, when it originally came. And I think it was, I want to say Tara and Vivian had first discussed this, because we had to make sure what the guidelines had actually said during when we first initially got the ARPA funding. So this has been going on for a while.
Okay. I guess one of my concerns is a statement was made that should this be paid and it not meet the guidelines, then the tribe would be responsible for payment or for the cost.
Is that per the guidelines what Zach had mentioned?
Yes.
So everything that we're asking to be reimbursed for will fly right through an audit. There's absolutely no issues with what we're asking for. Completely within the guidelines. Again,
That's,
there is no
yeah.
conversation. All right, go ahead.
No, that was my understanding too, that y'all had all the audit and everything presented at the meeting, the last meeting we had. And that's what I was brought to me, that everything was fine in their audit. That's the way I understood.
Chief, can I speak to one thing for
Yes.
a moment?
Yes,
So
you
the
can.
only reason sorry, Representative Higgs, the only reason I raise these questions is, we make these appropriations, and whether they're justified or not, I mean, I think that they are, but the other reality is all these subsidiaries will be asking for the same thing. And there was very hard questions asked of Fountainhead. There's been very hard questions asked of One Fire. I am simply just asking these same questions of MNB and MI. Regardless of the nature and funding source, this is still an investment on some level. And that's the only reason I ask it, especially because Fountainhead has already been asked for these type of questions, and they're going to have a similar request of this council. This is not the first time nor the last time we'll have to consider if it's worth making an ARP investment. In this case, I think all of the go signs might point yes, because they've already spent the money, versus some of the other subsidiaries. They're going to be asking for things that they haven't necessarily encumbered already, or maybe a combination of both. The majority of both MI and MNB's requests is a reimbursement. But again, back to the original point, this is an investment of the nation regardless of the funding source and regardless of its eligibility. That's why I ask these questions, because in a different arena or a different piece of legislation, they'll be asked again for the same reasons, for the same function.
Thank you, Mr. Harjo. I just wanted to remind everyone to please wait till you're acknowledged to speak when you ask to speak. I know it's a topic that everyone has something to say and everyone gets excited and caught in the moment, but that's how we do things around here. Go ahead, Ms. Golden.
Thank you, Chairman. I'd just like to say that what I've been hearing is that all of these things are reimbursable from ARPA funds. They meet the guidelines. What I hear Mr. Harjo saying, well, maybe we should take this money and put it somewhere else because maybe they're not worth the investment. Also, that other subsidiaries will ask for this reimbursement as well. If I remember correctly, Muskogee Loan Fund asked for reimbursement and they received it. They've already done this, and they had their audits and whatever, but it was tied to the nation. As far as I understand, with MI and MNB, they had their own separate audits, and there was no problems with those. And that goes along with everything that I understand that Mr. Harjo has asked for. If we don't reimburse these companies, we're not doing our job to support them and keep them moving forward. They have employees that went and got their vaccines, but they didn't get this company didn't get reimbursed. They paid it out. But other programs have done that. So we're putting them differently because of some things that have happened before or not. At the same time, if we don't, again, this money is not ours. It's monies that are reimbursed for our costs for small businesses. And if we want our businesses to flourish, then we need to support them, and we need to look at everything that we have. And from what I can tell, Mr. Jack Harjo has done that since last year. And he's asked, and it's taken a very long time for them to get this. And we are at this point now to say, yes, you need this. You have earned it, and we need to give it to you. Thank you.
Thank you, Representative Golden. I'm going to ask the committee if you have anything else to say. Okay, Representative Hicks.
Thank you, Chair. I know I did attend a meeting. I think Ms. Golden was there, Chief was there, both companies were there, Mr. Harjo was there, some others. There there was some discussion and there were some comments saying questions need to be answered at the meeting. And I know through emails, because I was CC'd in some of them, which leads me to everybody being okay with it because we're sitting here discussing it. It's on the agenda. So I don't know if there was discussion that wasn't handled, should have been addressed before it came here today, is how I see it. Came from Chief's office. So to me, the discussion should have been done. If it wasn't, I'm sorry. It's here on our table now. So that's all I wanted to say. Thank you, sir.
Representative Freeman, you have anything? Good. Go ahead, Mr. Harjo. We'll have one more comment from you, and if you have anything else, and then we're going to move on, okay?
The only thing I'll add is I bring this to council truly in the most fiscally responsible way. These questions were all asked. Some of them had answers. I think most of them answers. And in my opinion, this legislation wouldn't be here if most of them, if not all of them, had been answered. But I would not be doing my job in due diligence and fiscal responsibility, particularly with an investment to a company, if I didn't ask these questions and didn't make you think about it. Whether they're uncomfortable or not, I mean, it just is my job. I agreed to it. And I'm legally bound to these distributions and the reporting and all that. I take it extremely seriously. And so I don't do it personally. This is, and I ideally everyone would have walked in this room and felt the exact same way. And I feel very strongly about this, but these are questions that were asked of other programs I manage. There are questions I'll ask of the programs myself, and there are questions that I know I'll be asked again. And so it just is part of fiscal responsibility. And if you feel comfortable, I think you should. So.
Thank you, Mr. Harjo.
No further comment.
Thank you very much. Roll call vote, please.
Sandra Golden,
Yes.
Randall Hicks,
Yes.
Patrick Freeman. Chairman, you got 3 in favor and 0 against.
3 in favor, 0 against. NCA 23-109 passes. NCA 23-110, a law of the Muskogee Creek Nation authorizing the expenditure of American Rescue Plan Act, ARPA funds received from the United States Department of the Treasury for the physical relief funding for Muskogee Creek Nation Business LLC. Sponsor is Representative Golden.
Motion for a due pass.
Motion for a due pass was on the floor. So it's second by Representative Hicks. Discussion.
Ms. McCutcheon is here from the MNB program, and so is the chair.
Come forward, please.
Good afternoon, committee members. So what comes before you today is a request for a reimbursement for fiscal recovery funds. They do cover some PPP, some vaccination incentives, and some IT requirements that we have already expended those funds and are requesting the reimbursement through ARPA funding. Attached, you should have a copy that I had submitted to the Secretary of the Nation and did take the time to thoroughly review the Treasury rule and can guarantee with absolute certainty that every one of these are within those Treasury rule guidelines and would have no problem. We have also attached all of the actual expenditures with the invoices as far as meeting the Treasury's final rule.
Thank you. Any questions or concerns from the committee? Roll call vote, please.
Golden,
Yes.
Randall Hicks,
Yes.
Patrick Freeman. Yes. Chairman, you got 3 in favor and 0 against.
3 in favor, 0 against. NCA 23-110 passes.
Thank you. I appreciate
Thank you, folks.
Thank you very much.
We'll now relinquish the chair back to Madam Chair Golden.
Thank you, Representative Randolph. The next order of business is NCA 23-111, a law of the Muskogee Creek Nation authorizing the expenditure of American Rescue Plan Act, ARPA funds received from the United States Department of Treasury for the fiscal relief funding for the Light Horse Police Department. Sponsor, Mark Randolph.
Motion do pass.
There's a motion for a do pass. Is there a second? Second by Representative Freeman. Discussion?
I think we have some representative from Light Horse. Come down and speak to this legislation, please.
Good afternoon again. We're requesting to get
To
established
the
a
mic, please.
transport unit. We're trying to establish a transport unit. This funding is to the purchase of 4 transport vehicles and the salary and the fringe for the 4 officers that will be participating in that over the next 3 or 4 years.
Are there any questions, any comments? Do we have anyone online? Representative Hicks?
Thank you, Madam Chair. The only question I have is, if this is approved, this is for 1 year, correct?
No, this is 4 years, isn't it? 3 years.
3 years, and then where would the funding come from after the 3 years?
We're hoping to establish that between now and then.
This is for the 4 vehicles and 4 staff.
Yes, sir.
Thank you. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Any questions? Anyone else? I have a question. If this is ARPA funds, did this go through Mr. Harjo's office?
Yes, ma'am.
Did we hear from Mr. Harjo?
Yes. Are you asking about eligibility? All right. So unfortunately, because the public health emergency was officially declared ended as of May 5th, 2023, there are certain expenses and expenditures we can't charge back to that fund due to public workers like nurses and Light Horse Police. So this no longer fell under the direct eligibility. So this request is coming through the revenue replacement funds, of which we can allocate up to 10 million of our total award towards. And to date, we've only used, I believe, a little over 8 million. So in my opinion, this is a good investment on the nation because it resolves an immediate need that we have and otherwise would be requesting of tribal dollars that could be utilized elsewhere. So to my knowledge, this would also establish a transport system and as well as fund staff to fill those positions is badly needed for both district courts and Light Horse itself when transporting people after arrests have been made, I should say. So it is eligible, but under the revenue replacement portion, it was formerly eligible, and I believe we've made previous distributions under that former eligibility. But since that time, the public health emergency has ended.
So it falls in a different category of reimbursement, is what you're saying?
So there are a number of eligibility categories. Reimbursement falls under all of them, depending on if the expense that the recipient or the office or recipient who is applying for it, if they've expended it or not. So revenue replacement is that the recipient government, meaning the Muskogee Nation, we were negatively hurt or damaged during the pandemic. Therefore, out of our total SLFRF award of $493 million, we were allowed to take the standard $10 million that we could allocate to any purpose as revenue replacement loss, or if we can demonstrate an economic harm greater than that, we could accept that rate as well. We accept the $10 million, so out of that $10 million portion of our award, this is where that request is coming from. So it's not a reimbursement, but it's coming out of funds that the nation otherwise would have had access to, theoretically, if COVID didn't happen.
Thank you, Mr. Harjo. Are there any other questions? Any comments? I'll vote.
Mark Randolph,
Yes.
Patrick Freeman,
Yes.
Randall Hicks.
Yes.
Madam Chair, you got 3 in favor and 0 against.
That legislation passed. We'll go on to the next legislation. NCA 23-112, a law of the Muskogee Creek Nation amending MCNCA Title 36, 1-104 entitled Powers and Duties of the Tax Commissioner. Sponsor, Randall Hicks.
Madam Chair, a motion to do pass.
I have a motion for a due pass from Representative Hicks,
Second.
second from Representative Randolph. Discussion?
Madam Chair,
Mr.
we
Hicks?
have Mary Shea online. I'd like to give her a few minutes to elaborate on the legislation.
Ms. Masunkashay?
Yes, thank you very much. I apologize for not being there in person. This legislation is just an amendment to our licenses. We have had in the last few months, requests for our citizens when they are having an event, such as a wedding. We've had a couple of weddings being held in some venues within our boundaries and owned by our citizens. And they want to be able to have like a wine fountain. We've had a couple that wanted an open bar. They're not selling liquor. It's just part of their event that they're having. I did some research, and there are several other tribes that are doing something similar to this, or just doing a temporary license.
You cut out for a minute.
Oh, sorry.
We can no longer hear you.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, sorry. I'm not sure where you didn't hear, but I did some research, and there are several tribes that are doing temporary licenses, vendor licenses for these events. I really think this is something that is pretty simple for us to do when they do apply for their license. They will have to have an ABLE license to accompany this temporary vendor license. So this is all that this temporary license amendment is.
Any questions, comments? There are no questions, no comments. Roll call vote.
Randall Hicks,
Yes.
Mark Randolph,
Yes.
Patrick Freeman.
Yes.
Madam Chair, you got 3 in favor and 0 against.
3 in favor, 0 against. That motion passed. That legislation passed. We are down to referred legislation. NCA 23-075, NCA 23-097, NCA 23-100. And we are asking for the funding source. And I don't see Mrs. Killian, but she did report that if she wasn't available, that the interest on permanent fund would be the source for all of these 3 legislations. To accept.
Madam Chair, I make a motion to accept the funding sources interest on the permanent fund for all the legislation referred.
So there's been a motion for a due pass on the interest on permanent fund for the funding source.
Second.
Second by Representative Randall Hicks.
Mark Randolph,
Yes.
Patrick Freeman,
Yes.
Randall Hicks.
Yes.
Madam Chair, you got 3 in favor and 0 against.
Legislation, referred legislation passed. We're down to other business, and there has been a request to add legislation to our agenda. Yes, Mr.
I'm just an inquiry. It might. R 23-0.
Mr. Hicks was here earlier, but I don't see him. You're making the motion to.
Question, really. Motion to introduce R 23-099.
And a request to, they put on the table for other business. Is there a second? There is not a second for you to do that.
Madam Chair,
Yes.
the reason I didn't second is because if I remember correctly, the sponsor is supposed to be in attendance to the meeting before their address, so that's why I didn't second.
Yeah, he was here earlier, but he's not here. So we can address that. And now we're down to MNGE business.
And Madam Chair, on that one, I'd make a motion going to executive session for the report.
Mr. Hicks has made a motion to go into executive session.
Second.
Second by Patrick Freeman, representative. Who would you like to stay?
Madam Chair, we just need National Council representatives. AG's office is fine, our attorney's fine. I don't know who iPhone is. Is that Chief or?
Okay, so we're down to announcements. Planning session time has changed. Noon on Tuesday. In light of the premiere or something else. Could you do our benediction, and that'll serve as our adjournment?